This is what we're going to be doing, constantly patching this roadway until March, when we start the construction project that will rebuild northbound 75.
That's Diane Cross, a spokeswoman for the Michigan Department of Transportation. She's talking about emergency repairs underway on a stretch of I-75 in Oakland County, where massive potholes began appearing Monday, damaging cars, requiring lane closures, and causing massive traffic backups on the northbound lanes.
It's Tuesday, January 22nd, and this is your Daily Detroit. I'm Sven Gustafson.
And I'm Jairus Days. We'll have more on that still unfolding situation on I-75 with Cross in a moment. Her comments in this interview are definitely unwelcome news for people who rely on 75 to get to and from work.
That's coming up along with news about Detroit's rising home values right after this. Daily Detroit is brought to you in part by Bamboo Detroit. With an inclusive community, flexible modern offices, classes, and networking events, Bamboo Detroit helps entrepreneurs and innovative companies launch, land, and expand in Detroit. Become one of their more than 400 members today at bamboodetroit.com.
If you regularly drive on I-75, then you know that the freeway moves slowly during rush hours, and it's only gotten worse this week. On Monday, officials said potholes began appearing in the pavement on northbound I-75 between 696 and Square Lake Road, forcing the closure of the freeway altogether. In today's interview, Sven catches up with Diane Cross, an MDOT spokeswoman. She tells us that the road conditions on the freeway were only continuing to deteriorate on Tuesday and are likely to create headaches for weeks to come.
Diane, can you tell us what exactly happened out there yesterday on I-75?
Well, I'd like to say happened past tense, but it's actually happening. Yesterday, it started Monday afternoon, and it is going on again today, where the weather, having been extremely cold and causing heaving underground, and the warmer temperature during the day melting whatever ice has been underneath the roadway, has caused a road that is being rebuilt soon to just become deteriorating, crumbling. And we've got potholes popping up faster than we can address them. So at one point we had to close northbound 75 from 696 up to about Square Lake so that the Oakland County work crews could come in and fill the holes, which is very labor intensive, of cleaning out the hole, trying to get it as clean as possible before putting what's called cold patch. It's like asphalt in the summer, but it's cold patch in the winter into that hole. Normally crews are just rolling along and throwing it into the hole because there's so many to do. But because we know this weather is going to continue to get worse and we'll have more of this freeze thaw, we tried to do a more in-depth job for the holes that were there. Then we reopened it Monday night about 10 o'clock for northbound. And unfortunately, before the rush hour Tuesday was over, we had more of them popping up, and we've had crews out there with traffic down to one lane, again, roughly 12 mile up to about Crooks Square Lake. And we're going to have more of that because rain is expected, and we're going to have warmer temperatures for a couple days, and then it'll get cold at night. And this is what we're going to be doing, constantly patching this roadway until March, when we start the construction project that will rebuild northbound 75.
Oh, it sounds lovely. I'd imagine this is creating some pretty massive traffic backups.
It is. It is an unfortunate situation, and so many drivers are being affected by this. But those who have had flat tires or damaged rims or other damage to their vehicles, I'm sure would have preferred that we either slowed them down or closed the lane or were able to get out there. But as soon as we heard about it, we were out there within a couple hours to address it. But the weather is just making a bad roadway much worse. And it's going to be another 5 to 6 weeks before we can actually close northbound, shift that northbound traffic into the southbound lane so we can start rebuilding northbound 75 from 13 to Crooks.
Any sense of how many cars have been damaged at this point?
Most of those calls went to Troy Police, and I had heard at one point that there had been a couple dozen, but there were more today, so I am sure that that is a much higher number. And drivers anybody can file a claim against the state for damages, but unfortunately the law does allow the state to have a bit of time before we can get something repaired. So it is going to be a tough situation for a lot of drivers.
You mentioned that the northbound lanes are set to be rebuilt. So has this previously been a problem area on that freeway, or is this a new set of problems?
Well, I-75 between 13 and Crooks has been on the schedule to be replaced. It's part of a major project that we're doing on 75, roughly over a 10-year period. For a couple of years, we worked on the area up near Square Lake, rebuilding that interchange. And we're also going to be working 8 miles of 13 and doing some major drainage work so that we never have floods like we had in 2011. And the stretch from 13 to Crooks has been on the plans to be rebuilt. And we would have been okay, except the weather dropping to frigid one day and then warming up the next has really brought a pothole season that normally doesn't happen until March. But the last 2 years, we had the same problem last year on 75 and on 696. It's bringing it into January. And that is what's causing the issues. If it would just stay cold, that the ice didn't melt and we didn't have the temperature changes where you get the heating underground, then we would have been in a lot better shape. But the temperature has definitely made a bad roadway much worse. Or I should say a roadway in poor condition much worse.
Yeah. The cold patching fix that you're describing, is that effective in this cold weather? I mean, I'm thinking of 696, the recent reconstruction there and how that got pushed into the winter and the problems that, MDOT described because of, trying to rebuild a roadway with cold temperatures.
Yeah, we had to do quite a few different things on 696 that the contractor was responsible for the cost on that. Heating the ground, having heating blankets, using hot water in the mix with the materials, that type of thing. We are not able to do that on this. Cold patch is a temporary patch. It is a Band-Aid. We're going to have a lot of Band-Aids on an area that is in need of surgery, pardon that analogy, but it is definitely a temporary fix. So sometimes when we go back out to an area, it will be to replace a patch that we had put in previously. So we will be constantly patching this roadway for the next 5 to 6 weeks. While we will try our best to avoid morning and afternoon rush hour, safety is always number one, even if it does inconvenience tens of thousands of drivers by us having a lane or two blocked. But in order to have that freeway open, we've got to make it drivable. And so we're going to do our best to keep those holes filled. And if it reaches a state that it isn't safe, it'll be like Monday night and we'll just end up having to close it.
Safe to say this is another example of our crumbling infrastructure and lack of investment in repairing it?
I would say this is an exact example of that. And my Band-Aid analogy is usually what I use for the idea. We have been putting Band-Aids on different projects that really have needed surgery that had we had more funding that we could do bigger projects that would last longer as opposed to continuing to do maintenance on something that really needs to be rebuilt. I-75 go through to Oakland County. That's actually been in long-term plans, and it is at the end of its expected lifespan. So to have that roadway rebuilt this year was in the plans. It's a $245 million project between 13 and Crooks to rebuild northbound this year and then southbound next year. But the more funding you have, the more in-depth work you can do on a lot of different areas. When we have to move money around for either emergencies or bigger projects, then something somewhere is either not getting done or is being delayed, that type of thing, because funding is ultimately for why we get to do what we do. People will often mention Ohio as being such a better example. Well, Ohio has $1 billion with a B, $1 billion more every year to use on its roads. They also have toll roads that we don't have and probably never will have. But it's apples and bowling balls, not apples to oranges, or again, pardon my analogies. It's been a long day already.
All right. Diane Cross is spokeswoman with Michigan Department of Transportation. Diane, thanks for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Detroit's residential property values are up 12% in just 1 year. That's according to new information released today by the city of Detroit. While 90% of all Detroit neighborhoods saw an increase in property value, it shouldn't be surprising that Midtown and Brush Park had the fastest rise, where values rose more than 40%. A little more than half of the city's 194 neighborhoods saw property values increase between 10 and 20% from 2017 to 2018. Looking at the map, beyond Brush Park and Midtown, Corktown, Southwest Detroit, University District, Bagley, and areas bordering Grosse Pointe led the way. Overall, including residential, commercial, and industrial properties, values are up nearly 25%. The news comes on the heels of a complete reassessment of every residential and industrial property in the city of Detroit, the first in nearly 6 decades. The city will mail about 270,000 notices to residential and industrial property owners in the coming weeks to get residents and property owners ready for summer tax season. Commercial property owners will get notices later. This is the second year in a row values have risen in Detroit after 17 straight years of decline. Due to state restrictions on taxable value, property taxes shouldn't go up higher than about 1%. However, if a sale occurs, the taxes will pop up for the new owner to reflect the new value. It starts to change the equation across the city as the Duggan administration wants to shift back to home ownership and take more rental homes off the market. We'll have a map of where values are rising the fastest up on dailydetroit.com.
Waymo, the self-driving vehicle subsidiary of Google parent Alphabet, plans to expand its presence in the Detroit area. The company on Tuesday won a performance-based grant of up to $8 million from the state to help it find a new light manufacturing facility. The state says Waymo plans to invest more than $13 million and create between 100 and 400 jobs integrating its autonomous driving systems into vehicle platforms. Waymo currently operates a small office of about 20 employees in Novi. The Michigan Strategic Fund also approved a grant worth nearly $1.6 million for Magneti Marelli. The Italian auto supplier plans to invest $12 million to expand its North American headquarters in Auburn Hills and create 106 jobs.
Today's episode is brought to you in part by Milo Digital. Milo Digital is a full-service digital marketing agency that engineers quality results through data and innovative strategies. Learn more at milodetroit.com. Here is a trio of quick development stories around the city. First, a giant food hall and business incubator space is going into a building on Grand Boulevard, known for the colorful rainbow mural on its westward side. The 9-story, 75,000 square foot building in Detroit's Milwaukee Junction will be known as Chroma. It's a project being done by The Platform. There will be creative office space and co-working put together by hospitality-driven co-working operator Beauty Shop. The 14,000 square foot public market food hall will occupy the first 2 floors. It'll be run by Grandview Public Market from West Palm Beach, Florida. It'll have 14 chef-driven concepts, with most being locally owned. Work on the $16 million renovation project is planned to wrap up by the end of this year. Second, a Detroit school built in 1922 is going to see a new chapter as a multi-use building. The Thomas Jefferson Intermediate School at the Lodge in Selden is going to become, quote, a business ecosystem for local entrepreneurs, startups, artists, and residents seeking workforce training. It will be called Industry Detroit. Industry is a company based in Denver and has 2 locations there and another in Salt Lake City, Utah. The Detroit building is 3 stories tall and has more than 100,000 square feet. Inside, there's all kinds of accoutrement of an old school, an auditorium, swimming pool, halls filled with old lockers, and a library with mahogany shelves. One of the co-founders of Industry, Jason Winkler, is from here. And finally, the Element Hotel, located in the historic Metropolitan Building, is now open to the public. The space is gorgeous and we'll have pictures up on dailydetroit.com, as well as a link to a previous episode where we talked about this one in depth.
The chef of one of Detroit's newest restaurants made an appearance on the Today Show on Tuesday.
Chef Andrew Carmelini just opened a new restaurant at the Charnolo Hotel in Detroit. It's called San Morello. Andrew, good to have you.
Hey, great to be here, man.
And that hotel, it's just opening now, right?
Just opening now. We have a beautiful Italian restaurant there called San Morello, and we're excited about being in Detroit, and especially this time of year, it's cold.
Yeah.
So we're cooking Italian food that just like cooks for a long time in the oven, and it's just like super comfort.
Carmelini is indeed the chef at San Morello. The new restaurant features a Southern Italian menu of antipasti, wood-fired pizzas, pastas, and main dishes from a wood-fired grill. On the Today Show, Carmelini demonstrated how to make braised lamb shank with polenta, one of the menu items, plus his grandmother's meat-filled ravioli with tomato sauce. We'll link to the episode video on dailydetroit.com.
Yesterday on our show, we told you that Buddy's Pizza looked likely to open its first Grand Rapids location, and now we have confirmation. It'll be the company's 14th location when it opens in a former Carrabba's Italian Grill on 28th Street in the spring.
Before we shoo you out the door, we wanted to mention that The Daily, the excellent podcast by the New York Times, has an episode today devoted entirely to newly elected U.S. Representative Rashida Tlaib from Southwest Detroit. The episode is titled The Freshman Part 1. It examines Tlaib as a blunt-talking representative who is prone to using profanity and is part of a new wave of independent-minded, very progressive Democrats. It's definitely worth a listen. We'll link to it in the show notes. And that'll do it for your Daily Detroit. I'm Sven Gustafson.
And I'm Jer Stays. Take care of each other, and we'll see you around Detroit.
You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.